So the next thing that I'm going to discuss is the bottom billion or helping the bottom billion, which is under pa rin siya sa dealing with the global economy. And then sinabi din dito sa my key points about bottom billion is differences between the north and then the south. So bakit nga ba to nasabi? So the most common way of looking at economic inequality in the world is to focus on differences between the north and then the south, or the core and the periphery, or the developed and less developed areas. However, sabi ni Collier, nag-argue siya saying na um, it making or argues that in making that gross distinction na yung common way na pagtingin natin sa economic inequality in the world, which is yun nga na mayroong separation or mayroong differences yun nga sa pagtingin kay north and south, the core and the periphery, or the developed and less developed. So bakit nasabi ito na gross distinction? Kasi nga we ignore daw the poorest people in the world, what he calls the bottom billion. So it is clear that any population needs economic assistance if any global economic problem needs to be dealt with. And it is this one. So there are several areas in which things can be done to improve the situation facing the bottom billion in the global age. So ano-ano itong mga to? So ito ay ang first is aid. So noong 2016 kasi the most generous countries in terms of foreign aid, as the percentage, kung makikita nyo dito sa may slides, saying na si Sweden daw, si Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, and Belgium, sila yung mga most generous countries in terms of foreign aid. So, si foreign aid can go a variety of humanitarian function. So, ano-ano nga ba itong mga functions na ito? Ito ay disaster relief, food, and military assistance. For many in the development community, foreign aid has been seen as critical. So, bakit sinabi na critical? To helping people in the poorest country out of poverty. Excuse me. However, yung studies na ito is sineshow niya na yung impacts daw ng foreign aid o yung pagkakaroon ng foreign aid are mixed. So, bakit nasabi na mixed? Kasi nga daw, for example, kasi si Collier is not optimistic about aid. Yun yung pagsabi niya is not optimistic daw. Bakit? Even if it is doubled for a variety of reasons. So, ano yung mga reasons na to? Bakit sinabi na it is foreign or like impacts of foreign aid are mixed? Kasi nga, while some our aid will help, the effects tends to diminish as aid increases. And then sinabi din dito na aid money tends to flow into dysfunctional areas such as the military. Aid can stimulate civil wars by making the control of government more valuable. And aid has little effect on lack of natural resources. Aid has failed to improve transportation links and others. Kaya ayun, sinasabi na impacts ni foreign aid are mixed. And then, yun nga, sinabi din na, and many development experts are critical of its role. So, pero in spite of this, it is possible that aid could help, but only in concert with the other actions on the part of the developed countries, especially the G8. So in particular donor countries, interest often play a greater role than the recipient's needs in directing aid. Donor countries give very low levels of aid. So the most developed countries fall for short of their 0.7 pledge. And the donor countries are often not accountable for the aid they give. That's why it's said that the impacts of foreign aid are mixed. Para lubos nating maunawaan yung sinasabi na helping of the bottom billion, sa context or dito sa binigay na textbook is merong binigay na examples, which is the military intervention. It is one of the example of aid. It can be useful, yes, in restoring order, in maintaining peace after a conflict ends, and preventing later military coups, while external military interventions can be helpful then. So the militaries in the world's poorest countries often make matters worse. So mas worse yung poorest countries. For example, yung ones in power through a coup. So a military can demand or extort huge sums of money because they have the power. They have the um, power para, ayun nga, magsabi kung anong kailangan nila, which is yung aid. Sila yung may power, sila yung may kakayahan, sila yung may authority. And then the marginalization of less developed nations, yung mga less developed nations, can be reversed through trade policy. One course of action is the reduction and the elimination of trade barriers in both developed countries through unreciprocated barrier reduction within the World Trade Organization or the WTO, and those that contain most of the bottom billion. So the latter would need at least temporary trade protection until they were more competitive economically. But however, when goods from free trade are made cheaper, because employers can evade social and environmental regulation. So the example of it is the workplace safety standards, taxes to fund education and other social programs. This can simultaneously hurt those in the bottom billion. And then the second one that I'm going to discuss is about dealing with the political globalization, which we tackle about the accountability. So first, let's define what is accountability. So accountability, it is the obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's action. So there's a difference between responsibility and accountability. And also, it is referred to what happens after something that has happened. It concerned with the consequences of someone's action rather than their initial duty to carry these actions. So, sinasabi din dito na si accountability in a world of increasingly global organizations, including political organizations, the issues of accountability or lack thereof is increasingly important. Bakit daw important to? Kasi all political organizations, including the nation state, need to be held more accountable for their actions. Kasi if hindi sila naging accountable for of their actions, malaki yung magiging epekto nito dun sa mga nasasakupan nila. That's why if kurakot nasa taas, may possibility na yung nasasakupan niya is hindi ganoon kaganda yung takbo or like lack. And then um, yung kanalang economy is bagsak or like hindi ganoon kataasan kasi nga mayroong power na nangyayari which is hindi sila accountable sa kanilang actions. And then decline of the nation state has freed various organizations including political organizations from the constraints of being embedded. So for example nga nito, we noted the shift for some rulemaking from states to other forms of non-state governance. So this process can have the effect of eroding democratic procedures. Yung example nito is voting for candidates or enforceable laws, thus making political accountability, alam naman natin, more difficult. So one route to ensuring accountability is to have enhanced surveillance and over such organizations in order to be sure they operate in accord not only with their own rules and regulations but also with international norms about how such organizations should behave. And another route involves having more organizations and individuals involved in what these political organizations do not a greater dialogue and reciprocity among those who have a stake in them, stakeholders. So so being unaccountable for your actions is magiging way nito para ma-deal natin yung sinasabing political globalizations. And then yun, another one bukod sa accountability is pagiging transparent or transparency. So let's define first what is transparency. So transparency is the extent to which investors have ready access to required financial information about a company, such as price levels, market depth, and audited financial reports. So transparency also is being open and honest. Ang example nito is lack of transparency by Iran in terms of its nuclear weapons programs, as well as lack of transparency by United States and Israel over whether they have plans to attack Iran should it be shown to be getting close or to obtaining nuclear weapons. Um, it also said that um, yeah, about the example, which is the United States and then the Israel to Iran. So um, it also says here that over whether they have plans to attack Iran should be shown to be getting close to obtaining nuclear weapons. So one way to assess political transparency is using data provided by Transparency International or TI. So what is TI? So TI is an international non-governmental organization or INGO, and it is founded by Peter Agent. And also Peter Agent, who had become frustrated with his work at the World Bank. Sa kanya din yung World Bank, and he felt that he had been forbidden for addressing the issue of corruption in many nations throughout the world because it would adversely affect the bank's image. And as a result, he left the World Bank and created TI. So, iniwan yung World Bank, tapos nag-create siya ng TI, which is si Transparency International, which is ito yung ginagamit natin na nagpro-provide ng data to assess the political transparency. And then, sinasabi din dito na si TI, um, TI now how like which now has about 100 national chapters. So it focuses on combating corruption. So CTI is kinokombat niya talaga yung corruption, which is especially by pushing for greater transparency. So CTI parang nilalabas niya lahat ng mga datas ng mga politicians or kung sino man para maging transparent, mailabas para maging open sa lahat and maging open and honest. And dito kasi linalabas lahat dito na ipapakita. So, yun nga, sa pagiging from the word transparent. And then also, countries obtain scores ranging from 0 to 100. No corruption yon. So, in 2016, the least corrupt countries were Denmark. Yeah, Denmark. And then, sinasabi Denmark and a lot of countries. And then also tinatakal din about sa transparency is corruption perception index or CPI. So what is CPI? So CPI is a corruption perceptions index which is based on brings together a number of studies of the perception of experts on corruption in their country. So, ayun, marami ng mga countries ang gumagamit nito. And then, yung, like, ginagamit nga ito. And then, key points din, or natatopic natin, or matatakal din natin is si Bribe Payers Index, o si BPI. So, sino nga ba or ano nga ba yung BPI? So, ayon kay BPI or kay Bribe Payers Index, sinasabi na si Netherlands and Switzerland has the least prone to bribery. And then United States is nasa middle part lang ng bribery. And then si Russia is the most bribe-prone nations. Then in transparency, we also tackle the IT, which TI seeks for a world free of corruption with greater transparency. So yun yung parang ang pinaka main role or function kaya na-invent si TI, it is to seek a world free of corruption and with greater transparency. To sum up this topic about dealing with globalization, globalization is not a single phenomenon. Rather, there are many globalizations. While some need to be resisted and others are welcome and should be encouraged. So there are bound to be multiple futures for multiple globalizations. So there are at least three approaches to global economic resistance, which is the first one is the things that I tackled, which is dealing with globalizations. So I also mm, tackled that trade protectionism involves systematic government intervention in foreign trade through, for example, tariffs and non-tariffs barriers in order to encourage domestic producers and deter their foreign competitors. Although there exists a widespread consensus regarding its inefficiency, protectionism is still popular because it shields the domestic economy from systemic shocks. So, in contrast to neoliberal, free trade principles or fair trade aims at a more moral, equitable global economic system in which, for instance, prices are not set by the market but are negotiated transparently by both producers and consumers. Efforts at helping the bottom billion include increasing foreign aid, instituting international policies for redistributing wealth, and reducing trade barriers in order to integrate economically marginalized people into the world economy. And then lastly, increased accountability and transparency are key issues in dealing with political globalization. All political organizations at different levels should be more accountable for their actions. Increased transparency has been aided by various mechanisms such as transnational justice systems, international tribunals, civil society, and Transparency International, which is the TI. Thank you for listening and have a great day.